Hello friends, before we start today's stories, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment which story you like most, where you're from, and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Late November of 2022 found me working the graveyard shift at a lonely fuel station off Route 17, about 30 miles north of Charleston, West Virginia. The kind of place people only stopped at because they didn't have a choice. I'd been covering extra shifts ever since my roommate moved out, leaving me with the full rent and a fridge that hummed louder than my thoughts. Most nights were dead quiet. A few truckers, a lost traveler here and there, maybe a sheriff's cruiser rolling through. But that Thursday, the air felt heavier somehow. Cold and sharp, like it was holding its breath. The station sat between two long stretches of dark highway, with nothing but pine woods on either side. At night, the wind in those trees sounded like whispers you couldn't quite make out. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering every few minutes, just enough to make you wonder if something had moved when you looked away. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I decided to start cleaning early. I remember checking the clock above the coffee station, the red digital numbers glowing 1:32. The smell of burnt caffeine hung in the air, and my hands were freezing despite the heater running. That's when I heard the door chime, a soft ding that made me look up instinctively. A woman stood at the entrance. She wasn't like the usual late-night crowd, no messy travelers, no tired faces. She looked deliberate. Long gray overcoat, buttoned all the way to her neck, and her dark hair tucked neatly behind both ears. Her shoes made no sound on the tile as she walked in. It was strange because the door chime had gone off, but I didn't hear the actual door open or close. She moved with this slow, floating kind of grace, not like she was walking, more like she was gliding. "Evening," I said, trying to sound normal. "Store's closing in about half an hour, just a heads up." She didn't answer, just stopped in front of the counter and stared past me. Not at me, but through me. Her eyes were this deep hazel color, but something about them looked off. Too wide, too still. Finally, she said, "Do you have the restroom key?" Her voice was flat. Not monotone exactly, but calculated. Each word spaced perfectly apart, like she'd rehearsed them over and over. I hesitated for a second, then turned around to grab the bathroom key from the hook behind the register. It hung on a huge chunk of wood, shaped like a paddle. My boss's genius way of keeping people from stealing it. When I turned back, she was standing closer than before. I hadn't heard her move. The smell hit me then, faint but strange, like fresh soap mixed with something metallic, almost like the scent you get when you bite your lip too hard. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "Just bring it back when you're done." She reached out her hand to take it, and I swear I stopped breathing for a second. Her fingers were pale, almost bluish under the harsh light, and she didn't grip the paddle so much as rested it against her palm. Then, without another word, she turned and glided down the aisle toward the back hallway where the bathroom was. Her coat brushed softly against the chip rack as she passed, but I didn't hear any footsteps, not on a single one. The bathroom door shut with a dull thud. And then, nothing. No sound. No running water. No flush. Just the steady hum of the coolers and the wind pushing against the front windows. I went back to counting the register, but every few seconds I found myself glancing at the hallway. 10 minutes passed. 15. The station was closing soon. I needed that key back. At first I just called out, "Ma'am? You all right in there? We're closing soon." No answer. I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence was thick, pressing in on my ears. So I walked back toward the hallway. The closer I got, the colder it felt. Like someone had opened a walk-in freezer back there. When I reached the bathroom door, I noticed something weird. There was no light shining under it. The bulb inside was either off or dead. I knocked. "Ma'am? You okay?" No response. I pressed my ear to the door. The metal handle felt freezing against my skin. That's when I heard it. A slam from inside. It was so loud it made me jump back, like someone had kicked the door from the inside with everything they had. But it hadn't moved. Not even a rattle. For a second, my brain refused to process what I'd just heard. I stared at that door, waiting for something. Footsteps, a cough, a voice. But there was nothing. Finally, I decided to grab the master key from the office. I wasn't about to let someone die of a heart attack in our restroom on my shift. The office was small, barely enough space for a desk, a monitor, and a filing cabinet that smelled like dust and burnt coffee. From the little window, I could see the bathroom door down the hallway, still shut. My hands were shaking when I grabbed the master key from the pegboard. As I turned back toward the hallway, something caught my eye. The coffee pot. I'd unplugged it an hour ago, but it was steaming. Thin tendrils of vapor curling into the air like breath on a cold morning. The smell was sharp, metallic again, and made the back of my throat sting. I hurried past it and stopped at the bathroom door. The air around it felt colder than before, and the handle had a thin layer of condensation, like metal left outside overnight. I took a deep breath, turned the key, and pushed the door open. Empty. The bathroom was spotless. No woman, no coat, not even the faintest sign that anyone had been there. The light flickered once, buzzing faintly. The toilet lid was down, the mirror was clean, and the trash can had only the empty liner I'd put in earlier that night. But the bathroom key, the paddle, was gone. I checked the floor, the sink, even behind the toilet. Nothing. When I stepped back into the hallway, I noticed something else. My reflection in the small mirror across from the door looked off. For half a second, it felt like my reflection wasn't copying me, like it lagged, just slightly, behind my movements. I didn't look again. I checked the store, the parking lot, even behind the dumpster. There were no other cars, no footprints in the dirt, no sign of anyone at all. The night had gone silent except for the occasional rustle of trees. The air was biting cold now, my breath coming out in little white clouds. And then I saw it, hanging neatly on the outside handle of the station's front door, the bathroom key paddle, swinging gently as if someone had placed it there seconds before. The wood looked damp, tiny beads of moisture glistening on the surface. I grabbed it quickly and locked the doors behind me. Back in the office, I sat down at the security monitors. My hands were trembling so bad, I had to steady them against the desk. We had 3 cameras, one above the counter, one facing the aisles, one pointed at the parking lot. I rewound the footage to when the door chime rang, 1:32 a.m., and my stomach dropped. On the screen, I was standing behind the counter. Then the chime went off. But the door never opened. There was no one there. Just me, looking up from the counter like I was reacting to someone who didn't exist. Then I saw myself reach behind me, grab the paddle key, and hold it out into empty air. The footage showed me smiling, nodding, like I was talking to someone. But there was nothing on the camera. No figure, no movement. Then the bathroom door at the back opened, all on its own, and closed. The rest played out just like I remembered. Me pacing, knocking, unlocking the door. Only one thing was missing. The woman. It was like she'd never existed at all. I replayed it over and over, frame by frame. No glitching, no static, No missing seconds. Just clean, normal footage. Except for the fact that I was interacting with nothing. At one point, I even muted the audio and listened closely to my voice on the microphone feed. I heard myself say, "Sure, just bring it back when you're done." Then silence, followed by the faint sound of the bathroom door closing. But no footsteps. No other voice. The woman never said a single word on tape. By the time the clock hit 3 a.m., my hands were ice cold and my eyes burned from staring at the screens. I shut everything down, locked up, and drove home in complete silence. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not my boss, not my sister, not even the old guy who came in every morning for black coffee and lotto tickets. But I think about that night often. The way her voice had sounded like a metronome, the way she moved without sound, the way the air seemed to freeze around her. Sometimes, when I'm working late, I still glance at the bathroom hallway. And once, just once, a few weeks after that night, I heard the chime again around 1:30 in the morning. But when I looked up, the door hadn't moved. Still, I swear I smelled that faint mix of detergent and metal again, and the wooden paddle behind me on the wall was swinging slowly back and forth. I've done long-haul delivery runs for over 6 years, and in that time, I've seen my fair share of weird things along American highways. Ghost towns, flickering lights in the desert, even people standing motionless by the road at 3 a.m. But nothing has ever shaken me the way that night outside Redvale, New Mexico did. It was a Thursday in late September, the kind of dry, windless night when the desert feels like an endless graveyard. I'd left Phoenix around midnight, planning to cross into Colorado by dawn. My tank was half full, and the route looked empty enough to make good time. By 2:30 in the morning, I'd gone nearly 50 miles without passing another car. No headlights behind me, no towns ahead. Just open desert and that faint shimmer of mirage heat even in the dark. That's when my fuel gauge blinked red. I cursed out loud. I'd planned to stop earlier, but the last station had looked abandoned. My GPS showed a single pin 15 miles up ahead, a place called Miller's Fuel Stop. Never heard of it before. 15 miles later, a faint orange glow appeared on the horizon. The closer I got, the more I realized how small the place was. A single gas island, a flickering sign that just said, "Fuel," and a squat, concrete building with yellow lights humming over the entrance. No other cars, no movement, just a lonely desert wind that carried dust across the cracked pavement. I pulled up to the first pump. My headlights cut across the faded sign, and for a second, I thought the paint itself was peeling away like skin. The digital display on the pump looked ancient, the kind that clicks instead of beeps. When I slid my card in, the screen stayed blank. I tried again. Nothing. Inside the convenience store, a single fluorescent light buzzed. Through the glass, I saw a man behind the counter. Stocky build, head bowed as if reading something. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to just leave. But I needed gas. The air outside had that heavy, metallic smell, like wet coins or rusting iron. It clung to my throat, and for the first time that night, I started feeling uneasy. I pushed the door open. The little bell above it rang, a high-pitched jingle that didn't stop when it should have. It kept ringing long after the door had closed behind me. The man behind the counter looked up. His name tag read, Walt, though the letters were faded. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. They were glassy, wide, unblinking, and there was something about the way his jaw twitched that made my stomach tighten. "Pump's old," he said, voice dry and uneven. "You'll have to prepay inside." I forced a polite nod and stepped closer. Just fill up, number 1. He didn't type anything into the register, didn't even look down. He just stared at me and said, "You're traveling alone?" It wasn't friendly small talk. It sounded like a test. Yeah, I said slowly. "Headed north." He gave a slow nod, too slow, and then turned his head toward the back room door. For just half a second, I thought I heard something move back there, like feet dragging. He noticed me looking and said quickly, "That's just my wife." Night cleaner. But his tone cracked on the last word. Cleaner. Like he was trying to swallow it before it came out. I passed him a 20. He took it, fingers trembling slightly, and slipped it into the drawer without counting. Then, as he handed me the pump key, his lips barely moved. In a whisper so soft I almost didn't catch it, he said, "Don't stay long." For a heartbeat, I just stood there, unsure if I'd misheard. Then he smiled again, wide and wrong, and said in a louder voice, "Go on now." Fill her up, I backed out, heart thudding. Outside, the silence had grown heavier. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights felt distant. I unlocked the pump, started fueling, and tried to shake off the unease. That's when I noticed the pickup truck parked near the side fence, rusty blue. No plates. The windshield cracked, and something was dripping from its tailgate. A dark, slow drip that hit the ground with wet thuds. My first thought was oil. But when I bent slightly to look closer, the smell hit me. Metallic and rotten. Not oil. Blood. My hand froze on the pump handle. I turned back toward the store. Walt was still behind the counter, but now his head was tilted slightly, eyes fixed on me. No blink, no motion, just that frozen stare. I decided I didn't need gas that badly. I shut the pump off and moved toward my car, but as I reached for the handle, the door of the store slammed open behind me. "Sir!" Walt's voice echoed sharply. "You dropped this." He was holding something small in his hand. My wallet. I checked my pockets. Empty. He must have slipped it when I gave him the cash. Every nerve in my body screamed not to go back. But my ID, my cards, everything was in there. I forced a stiff smile, walked halfway toward him. The air around the store felt colder now, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. As he extended the wallet, I noticed something beneath his sleeve. Dark streaks running down his wrist. Then I heard it. From the open store door behind him, a low, muffled sound, like someone crying. "Your wife?" I asked, pointing. Walt's face twitched again. The smile vanished. Then, his voice flat, and he said, "My wife's been dead for 7 years." The world went still. Every sound, every thought, drained out of me. And then that muffled cry came again, louder now, and distinctly human. I backed away. "I think I'll just..." "Don't." The words shot out of him like a gunshot. Behind him, the back room door creaked open. For a second, I saw what was inside. A figure hanging upside down, rope tied around its ankles, skin gray and slick with something dark. Eyes open. Then the door slammed shut again. I turned and ran. The moment I reached my car, my keys slipped from my shaking hands. I dropped to the ground, scrambling for them as footsteps pounded on the pavement behind me. When I looked back, Walt wasn't running. He was limping, dragging one leg, his mouth moving soundlessly like he was whispering a prayer or a curse. I dove into my seat, jammed the key into the ignition, and hit the gas. My tires screamed as I tore back onto the highway, the rearview mirror showing his figure shrinking in the glow of my taillights. But just before I crested the hill, I saw something that froze my blood. Another man stepping out from behind the building. Tall, wearing what looked like a sheriff's uniform, except it was covered in stains. He was smiling, and he waved at me. I didn't stop until I reached a truck diner 40 miles away. My hands were still shaking when I called the local sheriff's department. The dispatcher was quiet for a long moment after I mentioned Miller's fuel stop. Then she said, very softly, "Sir, that place burned down in 2009. I insisted she check. She told me she'd send a deputy anyway." 2 hours later, they called me back. There was nothing there. No lights, no building, no pumps, just a patch of scorched earth and a rusted road sign half buried in sand. They thought maybe I'd fallen asleep driving, hallucinated it. But my wallet was still in my jacket, the one I'd supposedly dropped, and the $20 bill I'd given Walt was soaked in something dark, stiff and rust-colored when it dried. I don't drive at night anymore, and every time I pass an old empty service road, I swear I see the faint flicker of orange lights in the distance. Sometimes I even hear that little bell ringing, faint, endless, just beyond the dark. I've worked the night shift at a gas station before, but none like the one sitting alone on the edge of Highway 19, a desolate stretch of road somewhere in northern Nevada. My name's Derek, and before that night, I used to think I'd seen it all. Drunk truckers, road accidents, even the occasional fight at 2 a.m. But what happened that night wasn't human. The gas station was old, one of those pre-80s builds with flickering fluorescent lights and a single glass door that creaked whenever the desert wind pushed through. The air always smelled of dust and gasoline, and the desert outside was so silent you could hear your own heartbeat. It was late October, 2 weeks before Halloween. The manager, Mr. Bell, had gone home early, leaving me alone from midnight to 6 a.m. I didn't mind. The pay was crap, but the quiet suited me. I usually just read old magazines, sipped bad coffee, and watched the moths slam into the buzzing lights outside. That night, though, the silence felt wrong. Heavy. Around 12:47 a.m., I heard the front door chime. A man stepped in, tall, wearing a long brown coat. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His skin was pale, eyes sunken deep. He didn't say a word, just stared at me for a moment, then started pacing through the aisles like he was lost. I asked if he needed help. He didn't answer. When he finally came to the counter, he put down a single item, an old glass bottle of motor oil, the kind we hadn't sold in years. "Where'd you find this?" I asked. "We stopped stocking these." He looked straight at me. His lips barely moved as he whispered, "You shouldn't be here tonight." Then he turned and walked out. The chime never rang when the door closed. I stepped outside to check, but the desert was empty. Not a trace of him. No footprints on the dusty ground. No car engine fading down the road. Just wind. When I came back in, the bottle was still sitting on the counter. Only now, it was covered in thick dust, as if it had been there for decades. That's when the lights began to flicker. At first, I thought it was just another power glitch. The wiring was old. But then the security monitor above the register started to static, cycling through black and white snow. When the image came back, the man in the coat was standing at pump number 3, staring straight at the camera. I froze. I looked out the window. Pump number 3 was empty. But in the monitor, he was still there, staring, motionless. I grabbed the phone to call the sheriff, but the line was dead. No signal, no dial tone, nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The wind had stopped. The desert was still. Then I heard it. A faint sound, like metal scraping against metal, coming from behind the pumps. When I walked closer, my flashlight flickered. The beam landed on a small door I had never noticed before, half buried behind the pump station, covered in rust. It looked like it led underground. I should have turned back. I should have locked the door and waited for morning. but something in me needed to know. I pulled the handle. It groaned open, revealing a narrow staircase leading into darkness. The smell hit me first. Rotten chemical, like something burnt long ago. I followed the stairs down, maybe 10 steps, when I saw old shelves stacked with oil cans, tools, and torn maps of the surrounding desert. And then, I saw them. Old photos, nailed to the wall. Black and white pictures of different gas station clerks, every single one of them standing behind the same counter upstairs. My heart dropped when I saw the last photo. It was me. Same shirt, same badge, same shift time, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. But the date printed underneath was October 1983. I stepped back, shaking. My flashlight started to flicker violently. Behind me, I heard a voice, raspy, cold, whispering, "You shouldn't have come down here." I turned around. The man in the brown coat was standing at the bottom of the stairs. His face was decayed now, skin pale gray, eyes hollow and black. He smiled, and as the light flickered, I saw half his face was missing, torn away like burnt paper. I ran. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the hatch shut behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the highway. My old car was still parked there. I jumped in, slammed the door, and drove as fast as I could toward the town lights. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the gas station was gone. Just open desert. The sheriff didn't believe me when I told him. Said there hadn't been a station on Highway 19 for over 30 years. Burned down after a faulty generator fire in 1983. I went back the next morning with him anyway. Nothing. Just a concrete foundation buried under sand. But as we turned to leave, I saw something glinting near the rubble. An old glass bottle of motor oil covered in dust. Even now, when I drive that road at night, I see a flickering light in the distance. A faint glow where the gas station used to be. And sometimes, when the radio goes to static, I hear a whisper through the noise. "You shouldn't be here tonight." My name's Julian Marks, and I used to think the desert was peaceful at night. That illusion shattered one Friday in late August, the night I made the mistake of stopping at a gas station off Highway 46, somewhere between Barstow and Ridgecrest, California. I was 24 then, driving home from my friend's place in Bakersfield after a long week of graveyard shifts. The road stretched endlessly through the desert, and my old Ford Taurus hummed under the stars. The clock on the dashboard blinked 12:19 a.m., and the only light came from the occasional highway sign warning about deer and falling rocks, though out here, it was more likely coyotes and heat stroke that'd get you. The gas gauge had dipped below a quarter tank. I didn't panic. I'd made this drive dozens of times. Still, when I spotted a glowing sign in the distance that read, "Fuel and Food, 1 mile ahead," I figured I'd stop, grab some coffee, and fill up before the last stretch home. I wish I hadn't. The place looked like it hadn't changed since the late 80s. A small gas stop surrounded by open desert. A flickering neon sign half burned out so it read, STO instead of STOP. The building's paint peeled like sunburned skin, and a single light buzzed above the door, casting long shadows across the pumps. No cars? No movement. Still, I pulled up beside Pump 4, got out, and swiped my card. It didn't work. Of course, the screen blinked, "See attendant." Inside, the air smelled like old coffee and burnt rubber. The fluorescent bulbs hummed like dying bees. Behind the counter sat a man, maybe late 50s, thin as wire, eyes half closed like he hadn't slept in a week. His name tag read, Ray. He didn't look up when I walked in. "Pump 4, I said, pulling out my wallet. "Card reader's busted." He nodded slowly and pressed a few buttons on the register. "You traveling alone?" he asked. voice gravelly. The question caught me off guard. Yeah. Why? He looked up then. His eyes were cloudy, gray-blue, like the color of old glass. Just be careful, he said. We've had strange folks passing through lately. I gave him a polite nod, trying not to roll my eyes. Old desert towns were full of weirdos and their ghost stories. I took my receipt, stepped back into the night, and started the pump. As I filled the tank, I heard a faint metallic sound, like someone dragging a chain behind the building. I turned, scanning the shadows. Nothing. Just the whisper of desert wind and the endless hum of insects. Still, my gut tightened. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the edge of the lot. A figure, half hidden behind the trash bins, wearing something dark. I froze. The figure didn't move closer, just stood there, still, silent, watching. "Hey," I shouted. "You good out there?" No response. I took one cautious step forward, then the station lights flickered, plunging everything into near darkness for half a second. When they came back on, the figure was gone. The sound of the pump clicking full snapped me back to reality. I hung up the nozzle, jumped into my car, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the station lights go out completely. Total black. The highway stretched on forever. Empty. Desolate. My headlights cut through waves of heat still rising off the asphalt. For a while, I convinced myself I'd imagined the figure, maybe just a shadow or a trick of the light. But 20 minutes later, the unease came back. It started with a soft, thudding noise, barely audible over the hum of the tires. Thud. Pause. Thud. Pause. I turned down the radio, leaning forward. The sound was coming from the roof. At first, I thought maybe it was a loose panel or something hitting the car from the wind, but it kept perfect rhythm, like someone walking. Slow, deliberate steps above my head. Then came the tapping, faint but precise, from the passenger side window. I jerked the wheel slightly, heart pounding. Nothing outside but darkness. The tapping stopped, and then started again. Closer this time. I hit the gas, pushing the car to 80, then 90. The tapping grew louder, from inside the door now. I pressed the lock button repeatedly, even though the doors were already locked. The car's interior felt smaller with every mile, like the air itself was thickening. Then, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text. No number. No contact. Just 3 words. Greater than "pull over now." I nearly threw the phone out the window. Another text appeared, seconds later. Greater than "you're not alone." I slammed on the brakes, screeching to a stop on the shoulder. The desert was pitch black around me, only my brake lights glowing red on the asphalt. My breathing came in sharp bursts as I turned in my seat, scanning every inch of the car's interior. Nothing. But then I noticed the passenger door handle was lifting, slow and steady from the inside. I screamed and shoved my shoulder into the door, holding it shut as the handle clicked twice, then went still. My mind was spinning. I didn't know whether to run or stay put. But when I looked at the window, I saw something smeared across the glass. Handprints, long and dark, dragging down the surface. Only they weren't normal handprints. The fingers were too long. The smudges looked burnt. That was enough. I slammed the car into drive and tore back onto the highway. About 15 miles later, headlights appeared behind me. I almost cried with relief. A pickup truck. Finally, another person. I flashed my lights to signal distress, but the truck didn't pass. It stayed right behind me. Too close. Then its high beams flicked on, blinding me through the mirror. I squinted, gripping the wheel, trying to focus on the road, but the glare made it impossible. Suddenly, the truck honked, one long, blaring sound, and swerved to the side, pulling up next to me. For a split second, I glanced over. There was no one in the driver's seat. The truck sped ahead and vanished into the darkness. When I reached the next town, I stopped at a 24-hour diner. The fluorescent lights, the chatter of people, the smell of pancakes. I'd never been so relieved to see civilization. I parked right under the lights and sat for a moment, shaking. When I finally got out to stretch, I noticed the roof of my car, long scrape marks running across it. 4 parallel lines, deep enough to cut through paint and metal. And near the passenger side window, more handprints. Same shape, same burnt look. I called the local sheriff's office, told them everything. The gas station, the man behind the counter, the figure, the truck. 2 deputies showed up within the hour. One of them, a younger guy named Deputy Lowe, listened quietly as I explained. When I mentioned the gas station on Highway 46, both deputies exchanged a look. "What's wrong?" I asked. Lowe hesitated, then said, "Son, there hasn't been a station out there for 20 years. Burned down in 2002. Gas leak accident. Killed the owner. Name was Ray." My heart sank. I told them I'd spoken to him. I had a receipt. I pulled it out of my pocket, only to find it blank. Just faded paper. No ink. No logo. Nothing. They took my statement, told me to get some rest, and left me in the diner parking lot. I didn't drive home until sunrise. A few weeks later, I went back, against my better judgment. I had to see it again, to prove something to myself. But the area was just dust and debris, a cracked concrete foundation half buried in sand. No pumps, no sign, no building. Still, when I walked closer, I saw something glinting in the dirt. A rusted gas nozzle, half melted from heat. And next to it, a single handprint burned into the concrete. It was fresh. I was 23 when I took the overnight job at a gas station off Highway 17. The kind of place you only see when you've already driven too far, and your fuel gauge hits E. It sat just outside a tiny town called Meadow Creek, population maybe 500. Locals called it the last stop before the hills. I called it dead space, a forgotten pocket of nowhere between desert and forest. The station had one flickering light above the pumps and an old Coke machine that hadn't worked in years. The paint peeled from the sign that once proudly said, "Quick Mart 24/7. Now only the Quick still glowed at night, humming faintly like a dying insect. I didn't mind the quiet. In fact, that was the reason I took the job. I just dropped out of college, needed space to think, and the night shifts paid in cash. My boss, a grumpy man named Hal, only came by during the day. He gave me one rule before leaving that first night. Don't leave the station after midnight. No matter what you hear, stay inside. I laughed when he said that. Thought it was one of those small-town jokes people tell to mess with outsiders. It wasn't. The first few hours went as expected. A few travelers passing through, the occasional trucker, and long stretches of silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerators. Around 2 a.m., the road went completely dead. I was sitting behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed something strange. The sound of tires on gravel outside. Not unusual by itself, except I hadn't heard a car pull up. The sound grew louder, slow and deliberate, crunching the gravel just beyond the window. When I looked up, the pumps were empty. The lot was empty. The night outside was thick, moonlight hidden behind clouds, the only illumination from the buzzing fluorescent light above the door. The crunching stopped. Then, clear as day, the motion sensor above the door dinged. Someone, or something, had triggered it. I straightened, my throat suddenly dry. The automatic door stayed closed. The camera feed above the register flickered briefly, static crawling across the black and white screen. Then, out of the static, a figure appeared. A man, barefoot, wearing tattered gray pants and a torn flannel shirt. His skin looked pale under the grainy camera, almost gray. He stood perfectly still beside pump number 2, staring straight at the store's glass door. I leaned closer to the monitor. His eyes, even through the low resolution, glowed faintly, reflecting the fluorescent light like an animal's would. For a second, I thought he might be hurt. So, against every horror movie rule ever made, I went to the door. When I stepped outside, the air felt wrong, heavy, still, like the night was holding its breath. The man didn't move. His feet were covered in reddish dirt, his hair matted and damp. I could hear faint breathing, but his chest barely rose and fell. "Hey man," I called out. "You okay? Need help?" He slowly turned his head toward me, not blinking, not shifting his weight, just a slow, mechanical rotation. His voice, when it came, was quiet and toneless. "Greater than you've seen me before." I froze. "No," I said. "I haven't." He smiled, a weak, broken stretch of lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Everyone says that." Then he turned and walked toward the far end of the lot, where the pavement turned into desert sand. I tried to follow with my flashlight, but the beam only caught glimpses. Bare feet, gray shirt, slow steps, until he vanished beyond the reach of the light. The motion sensor above the door dinged again as I stepped back inside. I told myself he was just a drifter. Someone lost, high maybe, wandering through the night. Still, I locked the door. At 3:10 a.m., curiosity got the better of me. I pulled up the camera feeds to watch the playback of what happened outside. Except, I wasn't in it. The video showed the man standing there exactly where I'd seen him, but no one else. The door stayed closed. No flashlight beam. No me. But the man, he looked at something, like he could still see me even though I wasn't visible. Then, on the footage, he raised his hand and pointed directly at the camera, at me watching from the inside, and mouthed words I couldn't hear. I leaned closer, rewinding, replaying. His lips formed 3 clear words. "Still watching you." The power flickered. Every fluorescent light buzzed like angry wasps, and the monitors glitched. When they came back on, the timestamp had reset, back to 12 a.m. I should have quit after that. But I needed the money. The second night was worse. Around 1 a.m., the wind picked up, howling through the broken gutters. The desert dust whirled across the lot like smoke. The pumps creaked in their sockets, and every time I looked at the windows, I swore I saw movement in the reflection, like someone walking behind me. At 1:47, the door dinged. No one outside, but the smell hit immediately. That metallic, burnt scent that makes you think of old pennies and smoke. It rolled in like fog, seeping through the vents, clinging to my skin. Then the lights above the counter went out, all except one bulb near the back corner, flickering weakly. That's when I saw the footprints. Bare, dusty prints, leading from the door straight to the cooler at the back. The floor had been spotless moments before. I followed them, heart pounding. They stopped right in front of the cooler door. Inside, rows of soda bottles shimmered under the fluorescent glare, and in their reflection, he was there, standing behind me. I spun around, empty. When I looked back at the glass, he was gone, but something was written across the condensation inside the cooler door, like a finger dragged through the mist. Greater than "see you soon." The next day, I went to Hal's office and demanded answers. He looked at me like I'd just told him aliens were in the car wash. Then, after a long pause, he sighed. Greater than, "You saw him, didn't you?" "What do you mean him?" I asked. He didn't. Couple years back, one of our clerks disappeared. Left her shift halfway through. We found her car still running out by the dunes. What about the cameras? Greater than footage showed her talking to someone who wasn't there. He leaned forward. Greater than, if you see him again, don't talk. Don't go outside. Just wait till sunrise. By the third night, I was running on caffeine and fear. Every shadow looked like him. Every sound made me jump. At exactly 2:06 a.m., the ding came again. I froze. On the monitors, static. Then, through the blur, a figure appeared at pump number 1. Same man, same dusty feet. But this time, he wasn't alone. Next to him stood a second shape, barely visible, like smoke caught in the light. And that shape looked like me. It moved when I didn't. It tilted its head when I stayed still. On the screen, the barefoot man turned toward the camera. The static cleared for a split second, and I saw his eyes again. Black holes swallowing the light. He lifted a hand and pressed it flat against the camera lens, right on the screen. The feed went black. Then the lights in the store died one by one, like a line of dominoes falling in silence. In the reflection of the counter glass, I saw the cooler door open slowly behind me. The smell returned, metallic and burnt. Then a whisper, right behind my ear. "Now, you've seen me before." They found me unconscious the next morning when Hal came to open up. The front door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Hal said I was mumbling something about mirrors and eyes. The security footage from that night? Corrupted. Every file time-stamped at 12 a.m., same as before. The only thing visible on the recovered frames was a single word, smeared across the glass cooler door in the same pale dust I'd seen before. Greater than remember. I quit that job immediately. But every once in a while, when I drive past an empty gas station late at night, a flickering light, a quiet pump, a stretch of desert beyond, I catch my reflection in the glass. And sometimes, it doesn't move the same way I do. I've worked late shifts most of my adult life, but that night felt heavier than usual. It was late September, dry, windy, the kind of night where dust rolls across the asphalt like mist. I just wrapped up a 14-hour shift at the machine shop outside of Ridgepoint, a small town halfway between Fresno and nowhere. My hands were raw, covered in grease that wouldn't wash off even if I tried. The clock on my dashboard blinked 12:14 a.m. The highway was empty except for the occasional semi roaring by on the opposite side. I wasn't tired exactly, just wired. That strange half-awake alertness that comes from caffeine and exhaustion mixing together. The only light ahead came from the Bright Star Gas and Deli, one of those independent stations that somehow still survive in the middle of nowhere. Its flickering neon sign buzzed in the wind. Half the letters burned out, so it read, Brista. The canopy lights cast everything in a sickly green glow, and the air smelled faintly of gasoline and rain that would never fall. I pulled in mostly out of habit. There was one other vehicle parked near the pumps, an old brown van, early 90s maybe, with primer patches covering most of the paint. Its side door was dented, and a small sticker on the back bumper read, "Keep out." There were no other cars around, and no movement inside the store. I turned off my engine, grabbed my wallet, and stepped out. The cold air hit hard, carrying the faint sound of a metal sign creaking back and forth somewhere nearby. Inside, the station was lit by those humming fluorescent lights that make everything look too sharp. The cashier was gone. No one behind the counter, just an empty stool and a small black and white TV playing a rerun of some old sitcom on mute. I walked the aisles slowly, trying to find an energy drink and maybe something to eat. Everything felt off. The coolers hummed, but I noticed condensation forming on the inside of the glass doors, as if the temperature wasn't quite right. Then I heard it, a sound from outside. A click, click, click. Not loud, but sharp, like someone was tapping metal against glass. I froze halfway between the shelves. The sound came again, this time closer. I turned toward the front windows, but all I could see was the reflection of the store's interior lights. The glass was too bright to see outside. I waited. Silence. Just the TV laugh track flickering from the corner. I grabbed my drink and walked to the counter. Still no cashier. I rang the bell once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. When I leaned over the counter to look behind, I noticed a small notebook open on the desk. A half-written note said, "If anyone stops by after midnight, do not." That's where the sentence stopped. The pen was still there, pressed into the paper hard enough to tear it. That was enough for me. I dropped a 5 on the counter and walked back outside. The wind had picked up now, carrying small bits of trash and dry leaves across the parking lot. The van was still there, but something was different. The passenger door was now slightly open, just enough to notice. I told myself it must have been the wind. But when I walked past it, I saw something else. A fresh set of boot prints in the thin layer of dust beside the van, leading toward the back of the station. Every instinct told me to get in my car and leave, but curiosity has a way of turning fear into something stupid. I started my engine, headlights flooding the parking lot in yellow light. And that's when I saw movement, a shadow slipping around the corner of the building. I should have driven off right there, but instead I grabbed the tire iron from the passenger seat and got out. The night air was colder now, my breath visible in the headlights. "Hello?" I called out. No answer, just the soft rustle of wind through dry grass. I stepped closer to the side of the building. The concrete wall was stained and cracked, and the back area was barely lit by a single flickering bulb above the dumpster. A door stood slightly ajar, the employee entrance. It creaked softly in the wind. I didn't go inside. I'm not that brave. But as I turned back toward my car, I noticed something on the ground beside the dumpster. A wallet. Old, cracked leather. I picked it up, flipped it open. No cash, no ID. Just a folded gas receipt dated today, 11:38 p.m., and a smudge of something dark on the inside of the flap. I dropped it immediately, got back in my car, and locked the doors. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. When I turned on the headlights again, the van's door was now fully closed. I didn't even see it move. I shifted into reverse, ready to leave. But before I could pull out, the van's engine roared to life. Its headlights flicked on, dull yellow beams cutting through the dust, pointing directly at me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then the van's reverse lights came on, and it slowly backed out of the station, turning onto the highway. No signals, no brake lights, just slow, steady motion like whoever was driving knew exactly what they were doing. I waited until it disappeared before pulling out. The highway was empty again, but my chest felt tight, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. 10 minutes later, I caught those same dull headlights in my rearview mirror. The van was back. Same distance behind me, same slow, steady pace. I pressed the gas, speeding up to 70. The van matched me exactly. When I slowed to 50, it slowed too. My pulse quickened. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, but when I took an exit toward Old Carson Road, a dirt route that looped back toward Ridgepoint, the van followed. No hesitation. By now my heart was hammering so hard it hurt. I reached over and grabbed my phone. No signal. Just SOS only flashing on the screen. The road ahead was rough, lined with old trees and irrigation ditches that glimmered faintly in the moonlight. I'd driven this road 100 times before, but that night it felt unfamiliar, too quiet, too empty. The van's headlights grew larger in my mirror, closer, closer. Then they disappeared. I blinked, leaned forward, nothing behind me. No lights, no sound, just darkness stretching behind the car. Relief hit me like a wave, but it didn't last long. Up ahead, a faint glow. 2 yellow headlights, parked sideways across the road. My stomach dropped. I slammed the brakes, gravel spraying everywhere. The car fishtailed slightly before stopping about 20 feet from the van. Its driver's door was open. No one inside. No sound. The silence was suffocating. Then something tapped against my back window. Once, twice, 3 times. I froze. Didn't turn around. Didn't breathe. I shifted into reverse, floored the gas. The tires screamed against the gravel, and I turned hard onto the shoulder, barely missing the ditch. As I tore down the dirt road, I caught one last glimpse in the mirror. A figure standing by the van, barely visible, holding something long and metallic that glinted in my headlights. I didn't stop driving until I reached the interstate. When I finally made it home, shaking, drenched in sweat, I called the Ridgepoint Sheriff's Office and told them what happened. They sent a patrol to check the area. 2 days later, an officer called me back. He said they found the gas station empty, same as I described, but the back door was forced open. No sign of the cashier. And they found the brown van, abandoned about 3 miles down an access road. Inside, they found tools, rope, and a disposable phone filled with photos of different drivers, all taken through windshields at night. Every one of them stopped at the Bright Star station. When I asked if they ever found out who the driver was, the officer just said, "No ID, no prints. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing." I quit the night shift 2 weeks later, sold my car, moved closer to town. But sometimes, when I'm driving late and the road is empty, I'll see an old van parked just beyond the reach of my headlights, engine off, lights dim, and I swear I can hear that faint metallic click, click, click behind me.